Hey everybody, KC here. So today's Morning Newsbeat conversation is with Judy Spires. And I really wanted to talk to Judy because she's got such interesting experience in the food business, right? She was president of an Albertsons division. She ran Acme. She, various times, was also running Balducci's and King's. And these are all really different companies, right? So I wanted to get a perspective from her on the last 20 years. But you know the reason I really wanted to talk to Judy? Is my dad, late in his life, loved going to Balducci's for that one tomato or that one apple. And that tomato he would turn into this sandwich. And he'd call me up to talk about this one great tomato he got at Balducci's. And I really wanted to talk to Judy about how transcendent one tomato can be and can make a difference in somebody's life. So anyway, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Judy Spires. Judy Spires, welcome to Morning Newsbeat. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you, Kevin. It's an honor to be here. We go back a long way, and gosh, it's so exciting.
It's amazing that this is 20 years of Morning Newsbeat. One of the things I've told you this before, but I want my audience to know this, is that one of the reasons I have a soft spot for you and a soft spot for Balducci's, one of the companies that you've run, is because later in life, my dad was a teacher and he had 7 kids. And so we didn't have a lot of money when we were growing up. But after we all moved out and he had a little bit of money towards the end of my mom's life, and then when my dad was on his own, one of his favorite things was to go to Balducci's and he'd buy like one tomato or one apple. And he would just delight in the quality and would, he'd call me because he knew I wrote about the industry. Oh, I got the best tomato today. And it gave him such joy. And I'd be honest, I mean, in a lot of ways, sort of helped to shape the way I feel about the food industry, which is that's what it does for people. It's not just about Oreos and cornflakes. Although my father bought his share of Oreos and cornflakes, probably not from Balducci's, I don't even know. But it's that tomato, right? That speaks volumes.
Oh, and just to hear you tell that story just warms my heart, because that's the love that the associates at Balducci bring to the business every day. They envision people just having that love of food. They thrive on the love of food, and I can hear it in your voice. Are you a tomato sandwich eater today?
Yeah, well, that's what the thing is. And I've told you this before, that my dad would buy that tomato and he'd take it home and he'd slice it nice and thin and he'd put it on white bread with butter, because he didn't like mayonnaise and he really only liked really white bread. I have still picked it up. Now, I never eat white bread, and I would use spicy mayonnaise instead of butter, but I love tomato sandwiches. And my wife and my kids mock me, like, who has a tomato sandwich? And it's like, I learned that from we pick up things from our parents. It's like one of the best things on the planet.
Well, Kevin, you're quite an innovator, right? If you ever wanted to open another fast food chain, there you go, right? Different types of tomato sandwiches, right? Made with the best tomato on the planet.
Absolutely. So since we're doing this for Morning Newsbeat's 20th anniversary, let me ask you, where were you 20 years ago? What were you doing? And how have your feelings about retailing and innovation kind of changed over the years?
Well, first of all, happy anniversary. This is amazing. I don't know where those 20 years went, but there's been a lot of things that have happened in the last 20 years.
Among other things, my hair was red when I started, and it's like, what happened?
It looks good. You got plenty of hair. That's the good. But I would let me see, it's 2020, it's 2021. So a little over 20 years ago, we were just coming out of the Y2K thing. Just think about all the energy and time we, especially the supermarket industry, put against that. We had special groups of people. We met on a weekly basis. We were all waiting, to be prepared for midnight when, everything changed over. And guess what? We survived. Yeah. And the things worked and nothing got out of. And unfortunately, the next thing that came along in that 20-year period, especially for, how we feel here on the East Coast, so close to where it happened, was 9/11. Right? Which really, I think everybody can tell you the story, right? 20 years ago, everybody could have told you where they were when President Kennedy was shot. Today, it's where were you when the tower was hit. And, it was a very difficult time, but my memories are, the sadness, but people pulling together, right? The love of the policemen and the understanding of what they go through, and the first responders was just wonderful. But as far as the industry, the next thing I remember and recall around that time is I had just gone to the Rocky Mountain Division of Albertsons as the president. And what we were doing then was the big talk of the industry, and that is, how do we fight the gorilla, the big gorilla in our industry, who decided to open superstores and sell groceries cheaper than anybody could. And all of us were scurrying around. How can we do this? How can we compete? And you know what? Not only, like everybody was ringing the bell, not everybody, but people were ringing the bell. It's the end of the supermarket business. We can't survive this. But there were plenty of people who survived and thrived, which was really exciting. By what? Doing the things that they didn't excel in, doing the things that they weren't great at. Look at the last 20 years and what has happened with chefs, with prepared foods, with takeaway foods, with fresh offerings, and not only in specialty brands like, the Kings or the Balducci's that I ran, but in how every supermarket raised their game, right? And really offered the customer a great experience.
Sure. I mean, there were so many industry initiatives that came out of that, ECR, things like that directly came from that. I mean, one of the lessons, I suppose, is that there's always going to be a big gorilla of some sort. I can vividly remember when I started writing about the industry in the mid 80s, and I started with a magazine that doesn't exist anymore called Supermarket Business. And I vividly remember the cover of Supermarket Business magazine when I got there to start, and it was about how Cub Foods was the big gorilla. Everybody thought Cub Foods, that was the format that was going to destroy everybody. Well, Cub Foods still existed. It still exists today, clearly, but it did not destroy everybody, and people learned how to compete, and people continued, to find new ways to innovate. So in your career, you have led companies that range from the Kings and the Balducci's to Acme, right? Very different kinds of formats. Do different formats like that have to think differently about innovation? Do you bring a different mindset, or is it the same innovation mindset just applied to different business problems?
No, I think innovators are innovators. And when, you have to have innovative people on your team, and the industry needs big thinkers, big innovators. And it's really understanding your target customer. You can't be all things to all people. And so where are you going to focus your energies to be the best at what you're offering a customer? And where's that taking us? What does that look like? A lot of people are saying with, the pandemic, well, what's the new normal? I don't see a normal. I see an opportunity, right? I'm not a glass half empty or a glass half full person. I'm a glass overflowing, because I think these kinds of situations, from the gorilla and, that was going to ruin the industry, to what you just mentioned, to club stores, to online ordering, everything that was going to, change retailing forever. It's all changing for the better. So my glass is always overflowing. I tell people, you have not even thought of the things that can happen, and you have that ability to shape them now, right? You have that absolutely ability to shape those.
Well, and that was one of the interesting things to me about the time of the pandemic, is you had 18 months or so where retailers really were innovating, and they were innovating really quickly. That there was, and so retailers that were not doing online grocery, or were not doing pickup, or were not doing delivery, were suddenly figuring out how to do that. They were figuring ways to find new sources of product, because, shelves were empty for different reasons than shelves are empty now. But to me, they were innovating. But the reason they were able to innovate so fast is I don't think they were thinking about it as innovation. They were thinking about it as survival, which to me, I think is sort of a lesson in you know, so many companies, I guess when they innovate, they get a focus group and then they get a committee together and then they do a little test and then they have another focus group. And by the time they decide to roll it out, 3 other people have done it. And they're already behind the curve. And that it's really important to learn the lesson of the pandemic, which is just innovate, just try stuff, see what happens.
Well, you said it, you're right on. You're saying it exactly, right? What did we learn when we were little kids? I think there was a saying, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. And that's what's happened for, you know, the entire history of mankind. But, you know, sometimes in the supermarket industry, right, we have used the words evolution versus revolution. Right. I think we hit a revolution. And it was the necessity every day. And here's how I looked at it. You know, we put our team together and mobilized it. We met every single morning, early in the morning. And the question we asked ourselves, Kevin, are we doing enough for our people? Are we protecting our people enough? What more can we do? So we had people at the center of our focus. And our customers, how do we make the store safe for our customers? And I think when you look at the business and you really understand who you're doing it for and why you're doing it, you don't have time to evolve, right? You have, if we can just keep this, all right, let's just try it. What do we got to lose? Let's go. Yep, we're going to do that. And you implement it right away instead of going through all of the red tape, putting it up, that, you know what I mean? And if we get rid of that and we keep this spirit of action oriented progress in place, the sky's the limit.
Well, and I always think customers are actually, even if you screw up, customers, I think, are generally fairly forgiving if it's clearly communicated to them that you tried to do this because you thought it was good for the customer. We tried this because we thought it would be good for you. If it's not good for you, we'll change. Well, customers are forgiving that way or not?
Yeah, and I think that it was so evident, and I really loved it. You know, that was a characteristic we saw come out really loud and strong. You know, our customers were so appreciative that we were there. All of a sudden, you know, from one day to the next, you know how it was at the end of February and the beginning of March, stores were just getting bombarded. People were wiping everything off the shelves. You know, our heads were spinning. And then we're like, okay, we have to pull back. We have to see what we need to do. And we were named essential workers overnight. All of a sudden, you know, supermarket employees, which, you know, I've always adored and loved and have been in the business my entire life, we stepped to the front. It was kind of like an honor. It was, to me, it felt like an honor to be put in that class for my team and my people. That, okay, how do we step up and how do we do this? And that's the spirit I saw in the people working in our stores and the people on my team, of how they were so innovative, so and willing to communicate and willing to try. And our customers, on the other hand, Kevin, were so appreciative. We had never seen anything like that. You know, you would get letters, I'm so happy I got this great customer service, or this was really nice, or I want to tell you about Harry, he's so good. But I mean, it was just the amazing response of the customers, you know, organizing, you know, drive arounds our parking lot, you know, with parades, thank you, bringing in food, bringing in gift cards. You know, they just couldn't do enough, because you're absolutely right. They knew you were trying, right? And, you know, some of them had ideas they wanted to share with us, and we opened up a communication line like that. Our associates had ideas. It wasn't a one-way street. And I think when you listen to your constituents, you grow faster too, and you act very quickly on what your constituents are looking for.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when I probably started Morning News Beat, I think I probably wrote all the time about how important it was to be relevant to the consumer. But then over the years, sort of added on to that I thought it was important to be both relevant and resonant, because relevance sort of appeals to the head and resonant appeals to the heart, right? Or in the supermarket industry's case, the stomach. But there's the other word that I keep coming back to that I think to me, the industry needs to keep focusing on, like relentlessly, is that word essential, right? Not just in terms of the employees who are essential, because yes, that's important. And not just because it was essential to have supermarkets to go to buy food because you couldn't go to restaurants, you couldn't do any of that other stuff. But also the notion of figuring out within a company, and again, it's different for a King's or Balducci's than it might be for an Acme or an Albertsons, whoever happens to be, but constantly asking that question, what makes us essential? And then sort of like thinking about that on a daily basis and constantly adding to whatever it is that makes you essential.
That's a great point. And it's a great way to think of it, right? Because we were classified and we don't want to lose that classification. And if we continue to think of ourselves at that, then how do we make ourselves essential? I will tell you, we are in the supermarket business, we're still in the throes of it, right? We still have logistic problems, right? We can't, like I was just so amazed at, the team, my team and how they found product that people couldn't get, toilet paper and, those essential items, paper towels, cleaners, sanitizers. I mean, they work day and night to find different industries and different ways to bring it in. And I don't care. We'll worry about getting the bills paid later, and how we're going to put it through the system. We're going to get it in versus, all right, we have to fill out a PO and this has to happen this way. They didn't dot their I's and cross their T's. Anyway, how do you become a business facilitator versus a business stopper? And I think we learned how to do that better and faster than ever before. But we can't lose sight of the fact that it is still very tough for our associates on the front line, insofar as we can't get the help in the industry. And you see signs in restaurants, you see signs all over the place, right? What are our expectations when we go into a store that we were used to having stocked completely? We're coming up to our holiday now, right? So this is a Thanksgiving where people are going to have people coming back to their house. And already there's news story after news story. Well, there's going to be a shortage of this. There's going to be a shortage of that. You have to get it early. So I think it's put the customer's mindset there, but I hope it helps them be more tender, right, and kind, because it's not the associate's fault that their particular spice may not be available, or their particular filling that they make Aunt Mary's pie every single year is not there. That they're kind of thankful for we have what we have. And I'll tell you what I do in any kind of retail business I go into now. I just thank the associate for being there, because they're all working short-staffed, and they're the ones that show up are doing a yeoman's job. And if I could say anything and get the message out to anybody shopping in retail, please remember to thank these essential workers just as you did during the peak of the fear, because the challenges still continue. And they are working so hard to service the customers.
And and it doesn't take, it doesn't take much more to be pleasant, and that takes more effort to be unpleasant. I always think pleasant. If you're just pleasant, people like it. I mean, people just respond to it. But it's it's interesting. So let me ask you this then: what do retailers need to do differently? I mean, everybody's facing the same kind of staffing issues right now, some more than others. And there's a drive to say, okay, these guys are going to offer $15 an hour. Then these guys are going to go to 16 and 17, right? And then that's going to keep going out of control until things change. But it seems to me there's also a kind of a larger challenge here, which is, I'll come back to the word essential. How do you make how does a retailer, a leader like you, make or create a culture in which employees feel that they're essential, not having to do anything to do with the pandemic, but feel like they're, and the phrase I always use on MorningNewsBeat, they feel like their assets, not a cost, right? Which is a huge difference. And I think most of us have been in situations where we've been treated like we're a cost, and it's a terrible way to work. I mean, it's no fun. So how do you as a leader sort of create that culture so people are feeling that they're important to the organization?
Well, I'll tell you, the reason I came into this business is I worked as a part-time kid when I was in high school for a store manager who made me feel that if I didn't show up for work, that business wouldn't run. So, all these years ago, because, he had such a passion for the customer, he had such a passion for having the store perfect for the customer, and he gave you the authority to be part of that, right? To be part of knowing that these were the standards, and this is where we're going, and no customers were going to wait in line, and this is how it's going to happen. And it's not like he said it to you or he gave you anything physical or a reward, but just that he depended on you. Mm-hmm. He depended on me to the point that the day I got married, I didn't go to the hairdressers. I went to work and did the books for him. But that's absolutely crazy. But like the leaders today, what more can the leaders do? Like during the pandemic, we provided, food and extra financial compensation for the associates. But because before the pandemic, everybody was, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? How are we going to, the minimum wage is coming. What are we going to do? People started putting self-checkouts in, and they started thinking about automation, which is critical, but there still needs to be human beings, right? There still needs to be human beings that need to feel from the company how essential they are and how grateful we are that they are showing up, and some kind of recognition. I was thinking about this the other day. I always loved when I had a difficult customer, winning them over. It could almost be like a fun game for the winner of the week did the best job at winning over a difficult customer or something like that. And there's some kind of reward. So everybody's, we're all in this together. It's all part of it, celebratory luncheons, reward and recognition that, involves the team. So I think there's, great leaders out there that can figure out how to do that and continue to do that because it's important. On the other hand, the innovation that is going to be needed because the workforce has shrunk. Right? People are deciding to do things differently. We have to understand how they want to do things differently. We need to address and work with that innovatively. But a simple thing, I used a self-checkout the other day, and they're so cumbersome, but everybody's putting the same self-checkout in, right. And they're not user-friendly. Who's the person that's looking at them and saying, if I just changed this and did this and redesigned it like this, this is going to be so much easier for the customers to get through. And, where's the innovation? I challenge us.
You're so right. I don't think essentially there's little things here and there. Self-checkout hasn't changed that much since the day it was introduced.
They look like the same. They're the same. The bag holders are the same. You put the stuff, you're like this, and people want you to use them. How does the flow work better? How do you redesign them instead of just going, okay, put them in. How do you make them? How do you think of the end user? How do you differentiate yourself by having the best experience like that for the consumer, so they can get in and out easily of your operation too. But every one of those things, instead of just accepting, well, we've got technology and the customer has to do this, again, challenge ourselves. Here's a technology opportunity. How do we make it better? Because there's always ways to make it better.
I was in a 50,000 square foot supermarket the other day, a new store, and they only had 5 regular checkouts and they had 7 self-checkouts. And it was like, and to me, that just spoke volumes. And this had to be in the planning since before, certainly for 6 months to a year. So not dealing specific, not a response to what's going on right now. But to me, that's it speaks volumes about how the business is changing.
Yeah. And that was all thought of. Yeah, it was all thought of because of how could we staff a store in our model, in our penny business model with the minimum wage. Well, we learned that it's going to cost more than the minimum wage to get.
Well, that's the thing is that if you go back if you go back to before the pandemic, I hadn't thought about this. You were talking about minimum wage a second ago. You go back to before the pandemic, everybody was going, "Oh my God, federal minimum wage is $7.50. You can't raise it. You can't raise it." And some of the states were higher. And then people like, I guess, California or Washington raised it to $15 or $14 an hour, something like that. People say, "Oh my God, that's unsustainable." Well, no, nobody's paying that because nobody will work for them. Everybody's paying more than that, and the sky hasn't fallen. You know,
isn't it amazing?
There's fewer people to pay that to because there's a shortage of labor. But it seems to me that unless I'm wrong and I'm miscalculating this, and feel free to tell me I'm wrong. I mean, if all of a sudden it becomes more of a buyer's market than a seller's market, and there's more people out there to hire, nobody's going to be able to say to these people who are currently making $18 or $19 an hour, we're taking you back. They're going to have to leave them at that wage.
Not going to happen, right? That's why the types of technology that can take, repetitive work and do that, all of the innovation has to continue to happen at the pace it happened when we were forced to have to do it when the pandemic broke out.
Well, at the end of the day, isn't that why at some level the Amazon Go stores are so powerful, just philosophically, because they take so much of that out of the equation. Now they're incredibly expensive at the moment, although they're going to get less so, and they're going to be competitors that come up with ideas, and those are going to be less expensive. So I suspect we'll see more of it. But it's that notion of, I mean, for how many customers would say that, well, the shopping experience is great, but it always ends really badly because I have to stand in line, talk to somebody who's unpleasant, and then give them money, right? And so if you can fix that experience, either by getting rid of it completely or by having the best checkout people who feel like they're in the same way you felt that when you started, oh man, this store can't exist unless I'm really good to the customer and keep things going. That's going to be a huge differential advantage.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll be in the produce aisle shopping sometime, and I'm like, I hope there's a regular cashier open because I hate when I buy price up produce. Yes. I have to weigh myself at the self checkout. I mean, I prefer the conversation with the associates. And I found, I always choose to go through lines with people in them because I love the human interaction. And our associates who do work in the stores really want to do that. I think it's up to the leaders of the organization to give them the opportunity to do that and give the customer the choice. Right? Give the customer the choice of how they want to be handled in both, make it pleasant in both. So it's not like, oh my gosh, I have to go through self-checkout.
And by the way, you feel that way about weighing your own produce at the self-checkout, and you know what you're doing.
Yes.
You bought that equipment. You know how to do it, and you're confused. Imagine what it does for some poor schmo who has really no idea what they're doing, how confused they must be.
Well, I'll tell you what, people adapt quickly. I think one of the biggest adapters I saw was that the shoppers, for the shopping businesses, all the Lyft drivers and that Uber drivers that didn't have any work, and all of a sudden they became supermarket shoppers. Now they had a lot of questions at first, but you watch them. I mean, sometimes right during the height of the pandemic, you'd be in a store and 80% of the shoppers were shoppers. And they got the hang of it. They learned what things were. And, it was a little clunky at first, but that's one of the things that amazes me is how quickly that workforce ramped up and how proficient they became. And I've seen, during the height of it, I've seen, teams doing 4 orders at a time. They really, they knew what they had to do to make it happen. So it's amazing what can happen. And we need to learn from that in the non-brick and mortar businesses too, and the supermarket has to think about that too, and what that means to us and how we use that to our advantage.
So during the pandemic, and there's a reason I'm asking this question, and you just sort of led me into it. During the pandemic, was there something that, because you weren't going to movies, weren't going to plays, or whatever entertainment you go to, was there something you binged, a movie or a TV series that you binged that you just got addicted to because you were at home and you had the big screen and there it was?
Oh my gosh, one after another, you know what I mean? And it really got to be an addiction, but I have to tell you what I started doing is I started taking, Tommy Bahama had this young lady that was teaching you how to make cocktails. So I would learn a cocktail of the week. And on the weekends, I'd go out and buy these things, and I'd go, my husband, here's our cocktail. Here's our signature cocktail this weekend. Right. So,
by the way, if Tommy Bahama can do that, why couldn't Balducci's or King's or whoever, right? I mean, that's a really valuable lesson.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I was able to catch up on all of the binging that, I mean, from The Crown, it was unbelievable. Grey's Anatomy, I'm an addict. I was able to catch up on that. Now, A Million Little Pieces, I was able to get all caught up in it. I mean, there's just one after another. Ted Lasso, I just like anticipation when the next is going to come out. I mean, what's really neat about it is that you can watch them when you want to, not the old. And that teaches us a thing about business, right?
That's where I was going. That's where I was going, right? Doesn't the impulse that people have, I can do it when I want to do it, how I want to do it, isn't that same impulse applicable to the food industry, right? It's no longer, I got to go to the in this case, the store, as opposed to the theater. No, I'm going to have it at home. I'm going to have them bring it to me. I'm going to enjoy it at my own discretion.
Yeah, absolutely. There's really a connection. You see it very clearly. But I think the other thing that the supermarkets, that our industry has to move faster in is, and we collected a lot of big data. And during the 2000s, we were like, what are we doing with all this data? What are we doing? How do we use this data? How do we do it? So we're getting better at using it, and we're getting better at using the different kinds of virtual communications. But again, we're too slow. Look who's left on Facebook, right? All the kids left because they didn't want to be there with their parents. And now they've all left Instagram because the parents found them on Instagram. And you watch TikTok now, there is a tremendous application what supermarkets can be doing. I watch a lot of young women that you're like real quick on TikTok, tell you how to make, put this, and put this, and you got dinner done, right? And that's what customers need. How do you get a TikTok when they walk in the store that goes, boom, 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 go pick up these things and you're done, or have these things in your pantry and you're done. There's no more, oh my gosh, reading a long recipe or something like that. This generation has moved that quickly. So these, they want to eat at home. They want to eat good food. They want to feed their family, but they don't want to spend hours on it. And when you get on TikTok and start looking at all these great ideas, very addictive. It's just,
well, and it was interesting, and it has nothing to do with the food industry, but to me, there was, I don't know if you saw the story the other day. So there was a situation in Texas where I think it was a 60-year-old man had abducted a 16-year-old girl, and they're in a car. And apparently on TikTok, there has been popularized the sign that says, I'm being abused, I'm in trouble. And I guess it starts like this, you fold in your thing, you go like that. Right. Mm-hmm. And if you do it over and over, it means I'm in trouble. Well, the driver thought that she was just waving. The person in the next car said, I know that symbol from TikTok, calls the cops, follows the car, is on the phone with the cops saying they're at mile marker 43, 44, whatever it happens to be, and the cops stop them. What an amazing impact from something that was popularized on TikTok. I was just floored by that.
Well, it's really funny because when I was in graduate school is when texting started, right? And I remember a professor telling how someone that was abducted in a foreign country was able to text and was, saved by the text. And we're like, texting, and now we've moved everybody texts. Now we've moved all the way along to, every bit of information. I have my little sister took me out for lunch last week. I'm like, how'd you find out about this place? She's like, TikTok. It's where I get all my information. You know what I mean? Wow. So we in the industry need to know, where are our shoppers getting their information? You know what I mean? And how do you get influencers? How do you really use that effectively, or become an influencer yourself with the right people on there?
Wow. Well, you have been so generous with your time. I could do this all day, but I really appreciate your time and your insights and your support over the years of Morning Newsbeat. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for doing this.
Happy anniversary. Thanks. And I'm telling you, I want 10 more years from now, I want to be having a new conversation with you.
Okay, I'll be 77. They'll wheel me in.
Hey, you don't know what? 80's the new 50.
There you go. I like the way you think. There you go. Anyway, take care. See you soon.
Thank you. See you later, Kevin.